begin, excuse me. We will begin with the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. O sanje chedan sogi chonam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dage jinso gibe sunam je drola penjir sanje drobar sho sanje chedan soge chonam la chancho pardo dane chapsum je dage jinso gibe sunam je drola penjir zanje drobar sho sangye chedan soge chonam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dage jinso gibe sunam che drola penjir sanje drobar sho semjen tamje dewa tan dewe jutan dembar jurje Donga tan donga je tan rawa jurje Donga me be dewa tamba tam min rawa jurje Nyerin chadan nitan rawa Tanyon shembola nebra jurje. The Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. So now please think to yourself that we must do whatever we can to relieve all the suffering of all sentient beings. And the only way to truly relieve their suffering is to bring them to the state of Buddhahood, the state of perfect lasting happiness. And so think to yourself that we are listening, contemplating, and meditating upon the Dharma for that reason. And please listen with this motivation this afternoon. Now, the Dharma that we are listening to is the verses on the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, and as explained by the Ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary Youthful play, a commentary that is neither too short nor too long, a good length for beginners. And of the 8 chapters of this in our class this year, we are going through the 3rd and 4th chapters. We have completed the 3rd chapter, so we are speaking about the 4th chapter. And the 4th chapter has a brief teaching on how everything arises from karma, then a section on understanding karma itself, and then lastly a section teaching the synonyms of dharmas as a summary. And so we are in the discussion of understanding karma itself, which has 3 topics: identifying karma, then the presentation of karma, and then the third is the meaning of karma as explained in the sutras. So that we're in the section, the presentation of karma. And when we're talking about the presentation in karma, what we are in particular talking about is the presentation of karma according to the Great Exposition School. And so this presentation of karma has classifying karma in 2. The presentation of the general features of the 3 karmas, and the third is the presentation of the imperceptible karma. We've completed those first 2. So we are talking about the third, the presentation of imperceptible karma. And the presentation of imperceptible karma has what? Two topics, an overview and an extensive presentation. And so we are in the second of these extensive presentation, the explaining the vows in particular and explaining the three types of karma together. And of these, we're in the explaining the karma vows. And this is a very deep, we're going deep into the outline here, many different subtopics that we're getting into. Explaining the vows in particular has two topics, an overview and an explanation, and we are in the explanation right now. So we're beginning that explanation. So that section starts on the top of page 306. This explanation has three topics: the explanation of the vows of individual liberation, the explanation of the undefiled vows and vows of Gianna, and then additional points. So we're talking about the first, the explanation of the vows of individual liberation. So we've got the three different levels of vows. We've got the vows of individual liberation, the vows of dhyana, and the undefiled vows. So those are the three levels of vows that we're talking about now. And remember, when we're talking about vows, what we're talking about is the restraint from harmful action. So vows are always virtuous, okay? So the explanation of the vows of individual liberation has two topics, the teaching them together and teaching them separately. So for teaching them together, there are 3 points. The first is classifying them 8 in terms of name. So there are the 8 called pratimoksha. So we have 8 different types of vows that we call pratimoksha vows. So these 8 there are the 8 vows called vows of pratimoksha, individual liberation. So pratimoksha, prati is a Sanskrit prefix that sort of means individually or distinct, and moksha means liberation, so individual liberation. Some people translate it as personal liberation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. The vows of the bhikshu or almsman. So a bhikshu is what we would also call a fully ordained monk. The vows of the bhikshuni, which is what we would call a fully ordained nun. The vows of the shikshamana or nun postulant. This is an intermediate stage of vow for nuns only. So this is after they've taken the novice vows and before they take the bhikshuni vows. There is a period where they take these vows. It's kind of like training. Literally, the shikshamana, shiksha means training, like the training. So then there are the vows of the male and female shramanera or novices. So the male and female novices are obviously novice monks and novice nuns, right? Then there are the male and female upashaka lay precepts or pursuer of virtue. So the male and female, so they're the male holders of the 5 precepts and the female holders of the lay precepts. And then there is the vow of fasting, the upavasasta in Sanskrit. The vow of fasting can be held by sexless and neuters as well as males and females. So when you have people who are born naturally, remember this is 2,600 years ago before they had surgery. Well, they before had that sex change surgery, or gender reassignment surgery, I should say. Is that the... Anyways, before they had that sort of surgery, there always have been children who've been born either without a clear gender or who are born with the genitalia of both genders. So they're hermaphrodites. So they're people who are born without, neuters are people who lose their sexual organs for whatever reason. And so what this is saying is that these one-day-long vows of fasting can be held by anyone, regardless of your gender. The other vows are for people who are male or female. And so the male and female fasting vows are not counted separately. Now, this is kind of a little bit of a speculation on my part, but I think that one of the reasons why we talk about the vows, particularly the vows of the 5 lay precepts as being separate, is that for male and female, is that Sanskrit is a gendered language. Right? It's one of these languages where you have masculine, feminine, and neuter. And in many of these languages, there are different words for people of different, like a friend is going to be a different word for the male and for the female. And so I think that but that is entirely speculation. So I think that might be a reason why there are different words for the vows. Although when you get to the Bhikkhuni vows, the precepts are definitely different than the vows. But at any rate, these are the 8. Going from kind of top down, we've got Bhikshu and Bhikkhuni, that's 2. We've got non-postulant, that's 3. We've got the novice monk and novice nun, that's 5. We've got the male and female lay precepts, that's 7. And then we've got the fasting vows for 8. Okay? Now, sometimes you see this listed as 7, and the nun in training, the Shikshamana, is included within the novice nuns. Now, you might be wondering why there is the particular nun in training. And that vow started at the time of the Buddha, when the Buddha first had ordination for monks and later allowed ordination for nuns, actually one of the first religions to allow an ordination of nuns. And what they found is that nuns who took the Bhikkhuni vows early often had trouble keeping them. They didn't realize what they were getting into. This is more of a problem for the nuns for some reason than for the monks. And so therefore the Buddha made this particular period of time that you have to keep these training vows before taking the Bhikkhuni vow. So that's the reason for it. It's because of a situation that arose for the nuns that didn't arise for the monks. So combining in 4 in terms of substance, we've got the Bhikshu, Bhikkhuni, Shikshamana, the 2 novices, the lay precepts, and the fasting vows, right? So combining them in 4 in terms of the substance, but there are 4 in substance since name alone changes with the organ. Okay, so this is another interesting one. Vows are 8 in terms of name, so the Bhikshu and so forth, 8. But there are 4 in substance: the Bhikshu vows, novice vows, fasting vows, and pursuer virtue vows. The reason for this is since just the name alone changes from Bhikkhuni with the change of the sexual organs of a Bhikshu. So the story, to kind of put it in the short form, there was a Bhikshu at the time of the monk who took a Bhikshu as a male. And he woke up one morning to find himself having turned into a female. And the question is, I'm female now, but I still want to be a Bhikshu. Am I still a Bhikshu? And he said, yes, you're now a Bhikkhuni. So if there is a natural, spontaneous sex change, gender change, from male to female or female to female, then you can go back and forth a certain number of times. 3 times. As there is no cancellation, attainment, or shift in essence of the vows. In other words, they are proven to be the same. So because they changed, so it's not like once that monk woke up and was a Bhikkhuni, the Buddha didn't say, okay, you lost your vows, you need to now retake them. The Buddha said, you're still a Bhikshu. So Bhikshu is kind of like the overall term, and then within it we'd have male Bhikshu and female Bhikkhuni, right? And so the same for the lay practitioners. If you have the lay vows and you wake up tomorrow having changed gender spontaneously, then you still have your lay precepts. It's not so common. But basically, this is actually an important point. It's not actually that the vows are like they're not entirely independent of the bodily support, but it's that wanting to keep the level of commitment that you want to do, that substance of the vow that's important. And then there's the question of how they relate. They're separate but not exclusive. So separate means that the essences of these 4 types of vows are all different. But not exclusive means that one individual can have multiple levels of vows, vows of individual liberation. So to read the commentary, when a single individual has all 3 vows, they are definitely solely separate in their characteristics. That means the vows are definitely separate in their characteristics. So for example, anyone who has the Bhikshu vows also has to have the novice vows and the lay precepts. In fact, you take the lay precepts first, then you take the novice vows, and then you take the bhikshu vows. You have to have all three. You can't just skip and take the bhikshu vows. You have to go through all three. Likewise, if you have the novice vows, then you have first the lay precepts, and then you have the novice vows on top of that. So you can have 2 or 3 vows. So here the 3 vows means lay precepts, the novice, and the bhikshu vows. In the Tibetan tradition, you also see the word 3 vows, or the term 3 vows, applied to the pratimoksha vows, bodhisattva vows, and tantric vows, but that is different. So here we're talking about 3 vows as the 3 different levels of pratimoksha, the lay precepts, novice, and bhikshu. Because otherwise, if they were not separate, if one should forfeit the bhikshu vows, one would also forfeit the other 2, which is not the case. So in other words, if you break your bhikshu vows, or if you give up your bhikshu vows, you still have the other 2 levels of vows. So they're different, and you take them at different times. The ceremonies are different. Now, you might go through all the ceremonies in a single day. It's possible to do that, but there are different ceremonies for each level of vows, and many people take the vows in sequence over a period of time. So they're taken separately, and they can be given back separately, or they can be canceled separately. So they are different. So they're definitely different. Well, here's the problem, as it says in the text. In that case, because they abandon the same class but are substantially separate, they should be simultaneously exclusive in the stream of a single being, you say. Simultaneously exclusive means that if there are 2 things that just can't get together at the same time, that cannot be on the same ground or the same basis at the same time. For example, a crow and an owl are simultaneously exclusive because they both cannot sit on the same perch at the same time without getting into a fight, right? So this is simultaneous. They just can't be there at the same time. Now, the point that the person here, that the opponent is making, they're saying is that, well, when you have the vows of the 5 lay precepts, what's the first one? It's abandoning taking life. And that's also a precept of the novice vows. That's also a precept of the bhikshu vows. So how is it that you can have 3 precepts that are exactly the same and yet be different within a single individual? So, does a bhikshu really have 3 vows against taking life? How does that work? So this is the idea. So it would be like for the taking life, for taking that which is not given, for sexual misconduct, and for drinking alcohol and lying. Those are all, 5 different precepts for each of these. Then, like a bhikshu would have 3 of each of them. How does this work? A bhikshu would have more of each of them, which I don't need to go there. Anyways, they are not simultaneously exclusive of each other in that way, because taking a later vow is not the cause of forfeiting a previous. So we'll get to the causes of forfeiting vows, but it is not taught anywhere that when you take, that if you have the lay precepts and then you take the novice vows, that you then lose your lay precepts, or that when you take the bhikshu vows, you lose your novice, or that. That's not taught anywhere. It's not taught that taking a different level of vow is causes you to forfeit the previous. But so even though the 3 levels of vows all have you all have similar precepts, and just done out in different levels of detail, essentially. Well, maybe a little bit more than that, but the different levels of precepts, or they have the same precepts, the precept against taking life. The difference comes in kind of the extent of your intention and the extent of the other precepts that you take, which then kind of change the basis of the vow. So the 5 lay precepts, you're taking very simple vows. And it doesn't stop you from singing and dancing. It doesn't stop you it doesn't prevent idle chatter. Idle chatter is not a downfall for someone practicing the lay precepts. It doesn't prohibit things like that. It doesn't prohibit you from digging in the ground or pulling leaves off of plants. But when you get to the higher levels, like you get to the novice fast, then that also includes things like not wearing jewelry, not singing and dancing, not taking gold, and things like that. So, like, there are more things, and so there are more vows, and these vows prevent you from doing things that would cause you to get either kind of gyakpa, kind of full of yourself, or to get careless. And then with the bhikshu vows, there are even more of them. In our Mula Sarvastivada tradition, we have 253. And most of them are, a large number. There are things like, tie your robes in this way. Don't do this, don't do that. Have good manners, essentially. But, so there are more for the different things. So because there are more of these precepts, then the kind of the vow is a little bit more weighty, or it has a different feeling. And so that quality of the vow is what makes the difference in the precept. So even though the actual precept of not taking life, not taking that which is not given, not lying, not drinking alcohol or taking intoxicants, and those are all exactly the same, then the bhikshu vow being broader and restricting your behavior more keeps you more in line. And so therefore it is, the precepts are different. The precepts they're the same externally, different, they have a different basis. That's what it says they have a different basis. And so now we come to the second major part of the explanation of the vows of individual liberation, which is teaching them separately, teaching the vows separately. And this has 4 points. The first is their individual essences. By swearing to hold 5, 8, 10, or all the precepts, one becomes a pursuer of virtue, or a faster, or else a novice, or a bhikshu. This is one of these typical lists that you find in Buddhist texts where they kind of separate out the 2 lists of things and you have to combine them. So the 5 goes with the pursuer of virtue, that is a lay practitioner. 8 goes with faster. 10 goes with a novice, and all goes with a bhikshu. So it's basically saying that that's how many precepts each of these classes of vows holds. What makes someone a pursuer of virtue, and so forth? That is someone who holds the lay precepts. By swearing first to hold for the rest of one's life the 5 precepts of abandoning life, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants, that's 5. That is what makes you a pursuer of virtue. Or if you swear to hold 8 precepts for one day, to hold for one day the 8 precepts of abandoning the root 4. Now, root 4 means the 4 major ones about your behavior. That means giving up taking life, giving up taking that which is not given, giving up, here it is giving up sexual activity for the 1 day long fasting vows. And then giving up lying. Those are the 4 root precepts. Then you've got the 5th precept of giving up intoxicants. That is a precept of carefulness, because when you drink, you get careless. And then, in addition, refraining from dancing, ornaments, and so forth, all counted as 1. And then no high beds or great seats. And then no food after noon. So that makes a total of 8 precepts that you take for one day, and that makes you holding the fasting vows. Now these are the same precepts as we take when we do the Mahayana Sojong vows, and in our Tibetan tradition, people are more likely to take the Mahayana Sojong vows. But the Mahayana Sojong vows are a little bit different because the motivation for taking them is the motivation of bodhicitta. And you take the Mahayana Sojong vows for the period of one day in order to purify any downfalls that you've had, or any violations or minor bendings that you've done with the Bodhisattva vows. These vows are vows of individual liberation. They're more, your motivation is you want to practice discipline for one day in order to achieve liberation. Okay, so that's a difference between those two. But generally in our tradition, people are more likely to do the Mahayana Sojong vows. Then the third is to hold for the rest of one's life the 10 precepts of those 8, with dancing and ornaments counted separately to make 9, plus abandoning taking gold and silver for a total of 10. So the novice vows are the 4 root, the 1 of carefulness, that's 5, and then you've got singing and dancing and so forth as 1. Then you've got ornaments and perfume and such as 2, so that makes 7. Then in addition to that, you have not sitting on great or high seats, that's 8. Then no food after noon is 9, and then you have not taking gold and silver for a total of 10 for the novice fast, and that's the same for bhikshus and bhikchunis. Or then the 4th is to hold for the rest of one's life all the precepts of abandoning all the harmful conducts of body and speech, is how one becomes respectively 1, a pursuer of virtue, that is, someone who holds the lay precepts. The second is a fast, or someone who takes the 8 precepts of the fasting vow for the period of 1 day or night. Then the third is a novice monk or nun, and then the 4th level is a bhikshu, right? So when you say all the precepts, now another way you can think about it is that the lay precepts, the fasting vows, and the novice vows only hold you back from, in terms of the misdeeds of speech, the only one that's directly prohibited is lying. Whereas for the bhikshu vows, you've got lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle chatter are all basically covered by the vows. So that's another way of interpreting the word all there. Okay, so those are the 8. That's their individual essences, the number of precepts that you keep. And then there are synonyms for the vows. This is called discipline, fine conduct, karma, and vow. So this is called discipline. So discipline, now the explanation here is not an explanation of the English word discipline. The explanation here is one according to the Sanskrit word shila. So shila means cool, being nice and cool, because in India it's very hot. The sun is oppressive. And so when you find the cool moonlight, then it's nice and comfortable. Similarly, when you dwell in discipline, it's comfortable and cool. So this is called discipline. That is, these 8 pratimoksha vows are called discipline, as it correctly settles one. So it settles you down properly. When everything's kind of uneven, the word it uses in the auto commentary is when you're from the uneven activity. So it settles you down, and it is also the attainment of cool relief from the torments of immorality. As it is praised by the wise, it is called fine conduct. So the wise are the people who really know what they're doing. Say, this is what you should do. This is praised. So it's called fine conduct. And its nature is action. So it is karma. So taking the vow, the actual taking the vow is an action. And then the rest of it is you're keeping your mindfulness, awareness, and carefulness going. So that's like the action of refraining from harmful acts. So it's a karma or action. And as it binds the body and speech, it is called the vow or the restraint of individual liberation. So remember, the Sanskrit and Tibetan words for vow literally mean restraint. Well, that's the synonyms of them. So then to explain the names a little bit more, the percept and impercept of the first are individual liberation and the path of action. So this is verse 16, lines B through D. The perceptible and the imperceptible of the first moment are individual liberation. That is, means the first moment is the moment when you're taking the vow. The moment when you're taking the lay precepts and the preceptor snaps their fingers, that's the moment. That's the first moment. So at that moment, it's individual liberation. And it's also the path of action. In other words, the path that gets you involved in doing something. At the time of correctly taking a vow, the perceptible and imperceptible of the first moment are called individual liberation because they liberate the individual from misdeeds. So what liberates you from misdeeds? It's giving them up. You don't have to. You don't have to murder people. You don't have to kill. You don't have to steal. You can make a choice. Sometimes it's a hard choice, but you can make it. And so when you give it up, it's like that's individuate. It's liberating you. So it's liberating. It's kind of a relief. Oh, I don't have to worry about that again. And here the individual liberation, and I know I translated here, is because they liberate the individual from misdeeds. I need to look at this a little bit more. I was thinking as I looked at the texts this morning that it actually could be that you could say not just liberating the individual, but that they liberate you from individual misdeeds. And I'm not sure which is better, but they're like the distinct misdeeds that they're liberating you from. You've taken that out. So that's another possibly way, and it's not particularly, it's not made explicit in the commentaries. So it's an area that needs further research. They are also called the vow of individual liberation because they bind the harmful conduct of body and speech. So that's the first moment, okay? And they are also called the actual path of action because they're not the aftermath, but a part of the actual basis. So any action has three parts. You have the preparation, the actual basis, and the aftermath. So the aftermath is pretty much everything that comes after the action, okay? The preparation is getting ready to do it. So like you come and you make sure you've got your offerings and everything, and you're ready to come, and you come to the place where you're going to take the lay precepts. That is preparation. That's not yet individual liberation. Then that first moment, when you're taking the vows and the preceptor snaps their finger, that's the actual path of the action. That's the actual doing it. It's not the aftermath, it's that actual moment of doing it. So it's the path of action. The perceptibles and imperceptibles of the second moment are similar to individual liberation and are born from liberation, so they are called a vow of individual liberation only. So from the second moment on, so the snap has happened, and then from the next 13 milliseconds or whatever later, then from then on, it's a vow of individual liberation. However, they're not actually individual liberation because one has already been liberated by the first moment alone. It's that moment when it happens. The individuals who possess them. The 8 have pratimoksha vows. The individuals from the bhikshu to faster who have pratimoksha vows of individual liberation. Okay, so basically the 8 type of people, the faster, the male and female lay precepts, novice monks and nuns, the nuns in training, and the bhikshus and bhikshunis. Okay, so now we've come to the vows, undefiled vows and vows of dhyana. Now remember, these are vows that you get when you achieve levels of dhyana or when you see the truth or achieve level the undefiled meditation. So who possesses them? When one has dhyana, one has that. The nobles have the undefiled. So when you gain dhyana, you gain the dhyana vow. And the noble beings, those who have seen the nature of the Four Noble Truths, have the undefiled vows. So when one has dhyana, that is, when dhyana has arisen, one definitely has that, the vow of dhyana. In the preparations as well, there are vows of dhyana and undefiled vows. So the preparations here refers to the particular meditations that you do as you're getting ready to develop the dhyana vows. The dhyana vow, you can't develop dhyana by just saying, I think I'm going to do dhyana tomorrow. You have to train. So you have to go through the preparations. Because the dhyana vows, in order to achieve dhyana, you have to give up your attachment to the form realm, or your attachment to the desire realm, or to the lower levels of form. You have to train in order to get over that. So there's a particular meditation you have to do. It's called the preparations, and there are 7 different preparations for the dhyana vows. So the preparations are also taught as dhyanas. Just as we say, there is a rice field in this town. The area surrounding a town is called the town. Right? So, maybe in Canada, we probably wouldn't say rice fields. We'd say there's a lot of corn. If we're in the prairie provinces, we'd say maybe not. I'm thinking about America. Okay, I'm just going to say Kansas. There's a lot of corn in that town. Actually, the town itself, there's not much corn, but around it there's a lot. But you say there's a lot of corn there. I've been here for a while, but I'm still just not really Canadian. I'm sorry about that. Okay. The nobles, individuals who are learners and non-learners, have the undefiled vows. So when you get to the point where you see the nature of the 4 noble truths, and then continuing along that, you have the undefiled vows. Okay? And that means the learners and non-learners. So the learners means the stream mentors, once returners and non-returners, to use the names, basically people who are still training, still learning. And then the non-learners means arhats, people who have achieved nirvana. Then teaching how they follow the mind. During the discussion of the co-emergent cause, it was mentioned that the 2 vows follow the mind. Excuse me. So the 2 vows following the mind, of these 3 vows, it's the latter 2, the vows of dhyana and undefiled vows, follow the mind. In saying that they follow the mind, then as was explained in the 2nd chapter, as all of you who took the class last year, I'm certain to remember, they follow the mind in terms of time, in terms of being virtue and non-virtue, in terms of the concurrences and so forth. This is described in chapter 2 on verse 51, is it? Where did it go? I should have put a page mark there. Yes, 51 CD. They're at the same time as mind. They have the same results. They're the same in being virtue. And so they, in terms of being the time, they arise with the mind. They stay and perish with the mind. They're the same types of results. They're the same in being either virtue, non-virtue, or neutral. So in this way, the vows follow the mind. Now, the vows are always virtuous. So there are other things that stands in chapter 2 is speaking about that can also follow in the mind. But here, when we're talking about vows, they're always virtuous. So they arise with a virtuous mind, and they're dependent upon that in that way. So teaching how they are vows that discard. The 2 on not enables paths of no obstacles are called discarding. Okay. The 2 vows, that is dhyana, the vows of dhyana, and the undefiled vows, if supported on the level of not unable and produced as the essence of the path of no obstacles, discard immorality and the afflictions that motivate it. So, when you are doing the dhyana meditations, generally you don't have to achieve the actual level of dhyana in order to give up the afflictions for any particular realm. There is a particular level of dhyana called the level of not unable, because it's not unable to discard the afflictions for any of the levels, so it's called not unable. And so this is before you've achieved dhyana. And when you are on this level, then you go through and you're doing the meditation, then there are what are called the paths of abandoning an affliction. The path of preparation, the path of no obstacles, the path of liberation, and the path of the superior path, or the distancing path. So what this means is that when you have the path of no obstacles, that means when you've got a new level of wisdom. It's that point, that first moment when you've got that new level of wisdom. That wisdom and the affliction are, at that point, they're together. But the affliction can't last for long when you've got that wisdom. It's like you're seeing through your greed at the same time, and as soon as you've seen through your greed, then your greed goes away. Or you're seeing through hatred, and that hatred goes away. You see that, just can't, yeah. And so then it's gone, because it can't coexist with that wisdom. So this is what we call the path of no obstacles. So this is the actual, it refers to the moment when you're actually giving up. Then in the next moment, it's called the path of liberation because you're free of that. Then after that is called the superior path because you're getting further and further away from it. So those are the four paths of eliminating obstacles. So these are discussed in more detail in chapter 6. But what's important now is the path of no obstacles means that moment when you finally develop the wisdom that lets you overcome some level of attachment. Okay? And when you're on the level of not unable, which is one of the 7 preparations for the first jhana, that is a particular level where you are able to eliminate the attachments to any of the realms, not just the attachment to the desire realm, but also the attachment to the first dhyana, second dhyana, third dhyana, fourth dhyana, and the 4 formless. So it's a particularly powerful state of meditation for giving up obstacles, for giving up afflictions. So it's a particular level. So that is what is meant here. So because at that moment, when you're developing, at that moment you develop that wisdom, you have the vow of dhyana because you're on the preparations of dhyanas, and you're developing an undefiled vow, especially if you're entering the path of seeing, right? If you haven't seen the 4 Noble Truths before, but generally, this is on the path of meditation, you're developing an undefiled vow at the same time. And so those vows at that moment are also called discarding, because they're discarding the afflictions and therefore all the motivations for immorality. So that is what this means. So there are 4 possibilities between dhyana or undefiled vows and discarding vows, which they go through in the auto commentary, but that's not, I think, not such an important point right now. So we'll continue to the additional points. Mindfulness and awareness are restraint of mind and faculties. So there's a quote from the sutras, a very famous quote, and it's frequently recited, particularly in many different monastic liturgies, but also it's recited in the Kagyu Munlam book. It's in many different places. That says, restraint of body is excellent, restraint of speech is excellent, restraint of mind is excellent, restraint in all is excellent. So in the Kagyu Munlam book, it's translated differently. It's translated governing the body is excellent, governing speech is excellent. But here, it's translated a little bit more literally, restraint. So remember that vows means, the word for vow means restraint. So here the question that comes up when you're looking at this in either Tibetan or Sanskrit, but just doesn't in English because we have used different words, is, well, it's talking about vows of the body, vows of speech, and vows of mind. And what is this? Vows of the faculties. How can this be? And the sutra also says, whoever binds the faculty of the eye abides by a vow. So the question is, binding means restraining. So in other words, keeping yourself away, not going, when you see something attractive, not latching onto it. What is the nature of the vows or restraint of the mind and the faculties explained there? So we talk about restraint of the mind is excellent, and whatever binds the faculty, or whoever binds the faculty of the eye abides by a vow. So what are these? So these are not imperceptible forms. The vows of body and the vows of speech are imperceptible speech. So when it says restraint of body is excellent, restraint of speech is excellent, this means are imperceptible forms, right? So they are not the nature of an imperceptible. Well then, what are they, you ask? Mindfulness, which does not forget what to do and what not to do, and awareness, which knows what that is, are both also said to be restraint of the mind and restraint of the faculties. So mindfulness is the word mindfulness in Sanskrit is smriti, which means remembering, memory. And in Tibetan, it's trempa, sometimes translated as jesu trempa. It just means to remember. And in particular, what you're remembering is what to do and what not to do. So that's the mindfulness. And then awareness, which knows what that is. Now, the word awareness in Sampradana in Sanskrit and Sheshin in Tibetan is explained in different ways in different texts. Often, like we see in the Way of the Bodhisattva, it's described as knowing what's going on at the moment that is happening. And that's the general meaning that we use it, especially in the Kaji tradition. But it also can be like kind of clearly understanding or clearly seeing. So there are different explanations. When you see that same term explained in the Theravada tradition, they're going to explain it more on the level of that kind of clear understanding. And so that's what's meant here. So knowing what that is, knowing what you should be doing, knowing what you shouldn't do, and remembering that you shouldn't be doing it. So they're also said to be restraint of the body and the mind and the restraint of the faculties. So why are they called restraint of these? It's because they're what you use to restrain yourself. Because these two are present, these two prevent the mind and faculties from acting incorrectly towards the object and bind them. So you have your mindfulness and awareness, and you see that attractive person. And instead of going into your usual train of thought about that attractive person, you have that mindfulness that says, no, this is not a healthy train of thought. I shouldn't think like this. And you're aware that you shouldn't just not perpetuate it, and then you can let it go. Right? What we normally do is you see the attractive person and your mind just goes, blah, blah, blah. Right? So it's like that's one example. Or if you see something else that's attractive or something that's unattractive, or if you hear, whatever, with your mind, it's whatever that, but it's with your mind, it can be any of the sensory faculties. But here, when we're talking about binding the faculties, then we're saying that just basically taking control of your mind. And the way you take your control of your mind is with mindfulness and awareness. So that's the specific explanation of the vows of individual liberation. And so now we're going to talk about the three types of karma together. So that's a specific explanation of the vows. So now we're going to talk about the three types of karma together. These three types of karmas are vows, non-vows, and mid-vows. So this has four topics: how they are possessed, how they are attained, causes that cancel them, and what support possesses them. So how they're possessed means how do you have them? How they are gained is how do you get one? How do you take it? What are the causes that cancel them? And then what support? And support here means like your bodily support. How long they are possessed. This is four topics: how the imperceptibles are possessed, how perceptibles are possessed, the synonyms of wrong vows, and explaining the four possibilities. And with the imperceptibles, how imperceptibles are possessed, this has three topics: how vows that are not equipoise are possessed, how vows of equipoise are possessed, and how mid-vows are possessed. So basically, possessing the vow is, having the vow, right? Possessing and having are basically the same. So the vows that are not, how the vows that are not equipoise are possessed has 2 points. The first is about vows, right? One who has pratimoksha has the present imperceptible until it's canceled. From the first moment and on, one has the past. Now this last one, the first moment and on, from the first moment onwards, it should probably be. I think this is a bit of a problem in the translation here. From the first moment onward, one has the past. And actually, maybe it could be the second moment onward. One who has the pratimoksha, or vows of individual liberation, has the present imperceptible as long as they have the vows until it is canceled by that individual returning the vows or so forth. In other words, when you take the lay precepts and you make the vow, I'm going to keep this vow until the end of my life, and then the preceptor snaps their fingers, then you have that present vow, and you have that present vow in every single moment until, for example, you die. Or whatever other factor would cause you to lose or give up the vows. But you have it from that moment you take it until it's canceled. So let's say death in this example, because you've taken it for this for the length of this lifetime. So that's the present vow. So until it is canceled by that individual returning the vows and so forth. So returning the vows would mean going to someone and saying, I'm sorry, I can't keep these vows anymore. Please don't consider me as holding these vows. From the first moment and on until the vows are canceled, one also has the past. So there are different, this is another spot that needs more research. It's not entirely clear in what I was looking at. The grammar seems to suggest that from the very first moment you have the past vows, but that doesn't make so much sense. The ornament of Abhidharma says that after the first moment you have the vows. So this is something that I need to examine a little bit more. So it could be, from the second moment it makes it very clear. The first moment you have the present, then in the second moment you have the present and the past. Now, how do you have the past? Well, this is just one of those things about the great exposition view. They assert that things have substantial existence in all three times. And so the past vow, if it existed in one moment, then in the next moment it's past and it exists in the past. So this is just how they explain it. So that's what we're talking about. Then with wrong vows, it says, it's so for those with wrong vows too. So when, for example, you are, it's for those individuals who have wrong vows too, as they possess their wrong vows similarly. So once you, what do we say? Once you undergo the initiation ceremony into your criminal gang. I'm not sure how to say this. That's good. At the moment that initiation ceremony into your criminal gang is completed, and obviously I know nothing about criminal gangs because I don't know what they do. Whatever it is that you do, at that moment when you actually become a member of the criminal gang, at that moment you have the present wrong vow, and then from the second moment onward you'd also have the past. How vows of equipoise are possessed. So the vows of equipoise would be the ones that depend on your meditation, so the vows of dhyana and the undefiled vows. Those who possess the vows of dhyana possess the past and future. Nobles at first do not possess the past. In equipoise on noble past, the present imperceptible. Okay. So those who possess the vows of dhyana from the moment they arise until they are canceled must always possess both the past and future in the future imperceptible form. This is just the vow. So on the first vow, how you have the past moment is an interesting question again. But from the moment they arise, so from the moment you achieve that level of dhyana and gain the undefiled vows, from then on you have the past and the future vows of dhyana. Noble individuals, that means those who have seen the path, the truth of the nature of the Four Noble Truths, etc., at the time of the first undefiled moment, that means the very first moment when you first see the truth, that first seeing of the truth. At that moment, they do not possess the past undefiled vow, since it is not previously arisen. You've never had it before, not even in a previous lifetime. This is completely unique. I think you could probably argue with, actually it's likely, with the Gianna vows, it's reasonable on the first moment that you would have the past Gianna vows, because on that first moment of the Gianna vow, you would have had the Gianna vows in a previous lifetime. You've probably had them in many lifetimes. So for there, having the past one is reasonable. But for the nobles, on that first moment, because you only achieved the path of seeing once, then then at that first undefiled moment, you only have the future and not the past, since it has not previously arisen. This is because the vow has never arisen before the Dharma forbearance of knowing suffering. This is what we call the very first moment of the path of seeing. It's where you're first able to bear the sight of the actual truth. Before then, it's like you might think you can put up with the idea of everything being impermanent, suffering, empty, and selfless, but you can't really put up to it. It's just kind of an idea. When it actually comes down to the real meaning of what it is, you're actually kind of scared. You can't deal with it. When you get to that first undefiled moment, the Dharma forbearance of knowing suffering, that's when you can finally actually withstand it without freaking out, basically. You can actually see it, so you're able to bear with it, so it's the Dharma forbearance of knowing suffering, knowing the truth of suffering. So that's the moment when you have your first undefiled cognition. So the past imperceptible cannot have been possessed because you'd never had it before. Those who abide in the equipoise of the worldly paths and possess the vows of dhyana, and those in the equipoise of the noble path who possess undefiled vows have the present imperceptible, so they have all three times. In other words, when you have these vows that depend upon your meditation, you also have the present vow while you are not meditating, or while you are meditating. By implication, when you are not meditating, then you don't necessarily have the vow, it seems, but that seems kind of strange. This is another point that needs a little bit of research here. So these are the possessions of the different types of vows. And I think that is enough for today. Of course, there's more about this, how you possess your vows. We're talking about mid-vows and so forth, and the perceptibles, but I think that's a good stopping point for today. So let us now dedicate the merit of teaching and listening to the Dharma to the benefit of all sentient beings, so they may be freed of suffering, and freed in particular of the sufferings of plague and the resulting economic dislocation that is going on now. And so think to yourself that by having participated in this class, even if it doesn't bring direct benefit to others, that in some indirect way it's going to make us better able to help other beings, and dedicate this so that it may truly benefit all other sentient beings. Osanam de tanche sepani tobne nye peranam pamchene kegana chimbarlap trobai Simpet sole drova drol varsho. Thank you.